Please help me welcome our speakers. Returning to our virtual stage, we have Peggy Parskey and Dave Vance. Peggy is the president of Parskey Consulting, and Dave is the president of Managed Learning. They are absolute titans in the L&D space, and we are so honored to have them with us again. So, Peggy, Dave, the session is all yours.
Thank you, Casey. Well, I'm going to lead off, and Dave and I are going to be tag teaming throughout this. And so, welcome to Dig Deeper. Program evaluation only tells part of the story. Now, what we're going to do today is we have three learning objectives that we would like to accomplish by the end of this hour. First is for you to walk away with a broader business-focused view of L&D measurement. We will talk a lot, David will talk about this shortly, about the fact that we tend to conflate measurement and evaluation, and we want you to walk away understanding that they are related but different, and that while all evaluation is measurement, not all measurement is evaluation. And then we also want you to have clear ways to use these full set of measures. We're going to introduce you to those and to ensure the L&D function delivers strong results. What we will be doing in the last section is an application exercise. You are a learning audience after all, so we're going to give you an opportunity to practice and to learn from each other. So we're really excited about this and think that it's a topic that hasn't really gotten enough attention. And so this is really something that I think is going to expand your thinking today. So Dave, I'm going to turn this over to you.
All right, thanks, Peggy. And it's great to be with everyone. I think it's an exciting topic and maybe one you haven't thought a lot about. And what we've seen is through time, program evaluation has come to dominate measurement. And Peggy, if we get the first graph up there, you can just get a feeling for the emphasis through time. It started out with efficiency, but over the past couple of decades, it's really moved more towards effectiveness and outcomes for program evaluation. And down at the bottom, we're going to show you some of the very popular books in the field. And if you maybe haven't thought about it before, but take a look at the titles for these books by many authors that you know, and you'll see they all focus on program evaluation. And even one that says over on the right, measurement and evaluation, it's going to be all about program evaluation and not about any of the other aspects of measurement. And if that weren't enough, Peggy, let's show them the ATD competency model. You're familiar with that. And under developing professional capability, they don't even have anything called measurement. What is it? It's program evaluation. It's determining impact, which only has to do with programs. So although long ago there was more focus on a balanced focus on efficiency, as well as the other types of measures, now it's mainly on outcomes and effectiveness, and it's mainly on program evaluation. So going on to the next one then, we just want to drive home the point that, as Peggy mentioned, there are many other reasons to measure. Evaluation, it turns out, is only about 25% of the reasons to measure. In other words, about 25% of the resources companies spend on measurement is dedicated to evaluation. But that begs the question, what about other reasons to measure? And out of a total of 4 reasons to measure, we have inform, monitor, manage. So what about those? There's more to measurement than evaluation. And furthermore, if you look down at the bottom of the slide, we have more than 100 measures in L&D. In fact, in our book, Measurement Demystified, we list about 111 altogether. Program evaluation uses about 10 measures. So wouldn't a curious person want to know, what about the other 90 measures that aren't program evaluation? What's going on with those? Why don't I hear more about those? Okay. So just to be clear, when we talk about program evaluation, it's the common meaning that would come to mind when we talk about it. It's determining the effectiveness, efficiency, and impact of a program. Someone wants to know whether it was worth doing or not. And that includes levels 0 through 5. You're familiar with the levels from Kirkpatrick and Phillips. That is what we mean by program evaluation. But again, program evaluation is a type of measurement, but it is not synonymous with measurement. The two are not the same thing. Evaluation is just one of the 4 reasons to measure, using less than 10% of all the measures we have. So, moving on to the next slide, what are those other reasons to measure? The first is to inform, and this is actually where organizations spend a lot of their measurement resources. This is answering questions, identifying trends. And this is where measurement in our profession started. People were asking, how many courses are you offering? How many people have enrolled in those courses? The answers to those questions would be informing them. Still a lot of activity around that. The second reason to measure is to monitor. And here we want to compare the actual results against a threshold. So we're looking at history and establishing a reasonable threshold. You may be measuring level 1, participant reaction. And you may have noticed that you typically get 90% favorable rating on that. So you set that as a threshold, and you want to be alerted, or you're going to take a special look at any course that drops below the threshold, below 90%. So now in monitoring, you have an opinion about how you want the data to be. Informing, there was no opinion. Just give me the raw data. Monitoring, you compare results to a threshold based on history. Third reason, of course, is program evaluation. We're all familiar with that. So moving right along to the fourth reason, not as well understood as the others, is to manage. Probably the highest, but most complex reason to measure. In managing, we want to plan to do better than we ever have before. So it's kind of like monitoring, but monitoring was trying to do as well as you've done in the past. Managing says, I want to go above and beyond. I want to move the needle. I want to be better. And I'm going to put a plan in place with a specific measurable target. And I'm going to have to manage this in a special way because it's not going to be easy to achieve. It's going to take a lot of special program management and special management reports to do that. So that gives you an idea of the reasons to measure. There's more to life than program evaluation. Despite all those books you see, there is more. And there are no books written on informing or monitoring or managing, although we do include that obviously in our book, but the focus remains on evaluation. So let's just see where you are. First poll of the day, and Casey, you can bring that up. We want to know what you think is the most common reason to measure, just based on what you know, what you see in your learning organization. It is to inform, like kind of share activity measures, to monitor, meaning you have to have a threshold. Is it program evaluation, as we all understand that? And is anyone directing most of their resources to managing, which requires a plan and monthly forecasts? So let's see. Give us your answers, and we'll see where you are. As soon as you put your answer in chat if you'd like, you might give us maybe a reason for what you reported, or if having just heard us run through the other 3 reasons to measure, if there's one of those you think your organization should start doing more of, maybe put that in chat. So Casey, do we have some results?
We do.
Okay, well, this group, Peggy, is going to try to prove us wrong. And I love that when that happens because that makes life much more interesting. And there might be some self-selection going on. Maybe we have a higher level attending this particular webinar than the norm. But this group is reporting that your biggest reason to measure is program evaluation. And we have some who are doing managing, a few starting that, and monitoring. So inform second, but evaluate first. So that's very interesting. We often see a higher loading on inform and monitor. So Peggy, I think we have a higher functioning audience here, which is great to have.
I would love to hear from those of you who said that you're managing, put something into chat as to what that looks like. So, oh, and the all of the above. Okay. Yeah, this is interesting. I always like to see it, but still 56% evaluate and analyze. So not too far off from the message. All right, I'm going to close that and then we're going to keep going. So very interesting and thank you for that. And keep putting your comments in as we go because we're going to be watching the chat. So what we want to do now that we've sort of set the stage, we want to then get you to think about things a little bit differently than maybe you've thought about them before. And when we talk about measurement, we're talking about looking at the full L&D system. And it should apply to not just what we do with programs, but to the entire function. But as Dave mentioned, unfortunately, we tend to focus most of our energy on programs and on formal learning. And I'm going to want to get some feedback from you in chat as well. There are other things to measure. We can measure the effectiveness of our intake and needs analysis process. We can measure the effectiveness and efficiency of learner experience beyond formal learning. And there will be a poll on this, so keep thinking about it. And functional processes. So when we look at L&D, Dave and I have just created this graphic. It's a functional view. It's not a process view. And it is really just illustrative for what we're talking about here. But you do have a whole segment of L&D that is about leadership and strategy, about what is the strategy of the function? How do we support the business? What does that mean in terms of the things we work on and don't work on? What are the governance and standards? We need standards and governance to make sure that we are not doing things just individually, that we have some consistency in our processes. And we need, of course, to have strategic business alignment to make certain that what we are doing in the function is meeting the needs of the business. Otherwise, why are we here? But then when we look further, we do have a whole set of processes and organizations on learning demand and diagnosis, which includes intake requests, how we analyze skills and performance, and how we use things like performance consulting to get to the root cause and to understand whether learning is actually going to play a role in improving this performance. And not everything, as we know, is a learning issue, and we need to be able to weed those things out. So we can look at that and we can measure whether that is working. We also have the common things that we've been talking about: program lifecycle, the design, the development, the delivery, and the facilitation, where we spend a lot of our time. And also the whole learner experience from formal learning through on demand, guided, social learning, and embedded learning. These are categories that Josh Bersin has used and that I think fit very well in the current environment. But what we have still tended to do when it comes to measurement is measure those things that are part of the program life cycle and predominantly formal learning. And one of the things I would love to hear from you guys is how much non-formal learning are you measuring? Whether it's good, bad, or needs improvement, how much of that are you actually doing? And we're also going to have a little poll on that. But then there's this part, which are the functional processes. We have to have a functioning L&D operation, which looks at budget and resource planning, how we use our people and our resources, technology and systems. We have initiatives that are not always program focused. Remember COVID? Most of us want to forget that, but in COVID, every organization in the world had to figure out how to move from in person to online virtual. And that was something for the function. It was, yes, dealt with programs, but it wasn't a program specific. And then, of course, we have to manage our vendors and partners. They're part of our ability to successfully get solutions to our learners. And then the last piece, and this is not a process flow, so it's not measurement as an oversight, it's just a part of a function, is that we have different types of measurement for program evaluation, learning analytics that looks at the learner experience, and then functional measurement. And the point being that all of these things are part of how we have to think about measurement, that it is not just where the stars are. So we're going to have a poll, so just keep thinking about this. So let's talk about, well, why should we measure the L&D functional processes? And the simple answer to that is that we need to understand how the function is working and to make sure that it's running efficiently and effectively. it's mostly efficiency measures, which often I think get a bad rap that people look at it and go, it's just efficiency measures. It's like, no, this is part of what we have to look at. But also there are effectiveness measures. We can run something efficiently and not effectively. I've seen that before. And in some cases, there may be some kind of outcome or impact measures. We have to put this information in monthly reports. If a CLO is reporting to the CFO or the CEO, he or she needs to have this kind of data. It would show up in an annual report. And oh, by the way, since you usually have to make a case for your budget, likely want it to go up, this is data that helps in your business case presentation. And without it, you're left with really only a sliver of what the organization is doing. So here's that poll I promised you, which is what areas do you measure today beyond programs? So it's the stuff in the yellow box. Do you measure the learning experience beyond formal, functional processes, both, or you don't know, which is a valid response? Let's see what we find.
Because
So
we're talking out of the box, Peggy, we may get more that don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Of course, this is a high performing group. Maybe they'll
right,
surprise
exactly.
us again here,
I know.
and we'll get a lot of both category. Let's see what it turns
Let's
out
see
to
what
be.
you, yeah,
I'm
I
rooting
know.
for both. Let's see what happens here.
I'm rooting for both too. I am definitely rooting for both. How are we doing on the responses, Casey?
We are at about 60, well, 68%. It looks like it's trickling down. So I'll go ahead and end and share now.
Sounds great. Okay.
Oh,
So,
all
oh,
right.
38% of you said both. Good for you.
Uh-huh.
I'm really, and again, please put in chat what you're doing. We want to know. We learn from you as well as you learning from us. So we want to learn in both ways. 27%, actually the smaller percentage, the highest percentage was both, followed by learner experience and then 11% functional processes, with 24% don't know. And that's fair, right? Part of what we're presenting are things you probably haven't thought about and likely not to know. But this is good to know that you're doing both. But and someone said I had to put don't know, but the right answer would have been none of the above. So thank you for your honesty. I appreciate that. We didn't give a none of the above. We should have.
No, we should have, Peggy. We should have done the
The
neither there. We missed
the
that
neither,
one.
and we did miss out. So thank you. For next time, we will do that. So let's talk about this full picture of L&D. And what's important here is we've got this kind of push-pull between looking at programs and looking at the operations. And I'm going to give a plug to Cognota. Cognota is doing a lot of work in this area. They have created a whole new category called Learn Ops. And that's really what they're talking about is how do you get operational efficiency within an organization. And part of the challenge is that in an organization that only focuses on the program side, you're missing those things that actually are critical to making programs able to function and do what they're supposed to do. So I want to talk about what happens if you only do one of these two. So we've got this little table here with the rows being operational efficiency, high or low. The columns are program effectiveness, high and low. So the sweet spot, high operational efficiency, high program effectiveness. You get an organization that's strategic, meeting the needs of the business, and scalable. So you're able to adapt to the needs of the business. What happens when you have high operational efficiency but low program effectiveness and impact? Well, you're a very efficient organization, but you're inconsequential. Like, what are you even doing? Because your goal is to help improve the business, and being an operationally efficient organization does not in and of itself do that. So you don't want to be in that position, clearly. But you don't want to be at the other end either, because if you're in the low operational efficiency, high program effectiveness, you get strong programs, but you cannot scale and you cannot get the capacity that you need. again, I'm going to cite another COVID example. I know people are really tired of listening to COVID, but we were doing a Center for Talent Reporting conference, and we had a panel of chief learning officers. And one chief learning officer was very brave and admitted that they did not have the data that they needed and were not measuring the things they needed to be able to pivot during COVID. And so they really were in a very difficult situation trying to figure out what to do and how to do it because they didn't know where resources were or how to harness them. Another organization had been doing all this and they were able to move very, very quickly. So it makes a difference. So if you are a program manager, you should care about what the organization is measuring, managing, and in operations. And then clearly, if you're in low, this is an organization at risk. Inconsistent value, you're going to get a lot of skepticism. And these are organizations that end up getting disbanded or they get put into other parts of the organization or shadow organization service. Not a good place to be. But either of these diagonals, not good either. So you get real gains. My point here is that you get gains from managing the entire operation. You get to see a full system perspective. These are systems, and systems are interconnected. So you cannot do, as I've already mentioned, if you cannot do programs without the operation supporting it. And so you have to have all of these things working in concert. It does demonstrate that leaders are managing operations as well as outcomes. And when you're managing your vendors and your technology, you're operating like a disciplined business unit, which is what you want to be able to convey. As I've mentioned in my COVID example, you can be ready. You're able to pivot. You've got the data and the information, and you're running it in a way in which you can make very short-term decisions that benefit the organization if there's something sudden that occurs. You're making sure you're using your resources properly. You don't want your people to burn out. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're trying to do something the business needs, but you don't have the capability to do it. You don't want to be in that position. It's awkward and it's difficult and it breeds dissatisfaction. And it enables you to really have a whole approach towards continuous improvement. So this is really what learning like a business looks like. You're doing both. So we're going to pivot over. I'm going to turn this back over to Dave, and we're going to talk about it. What does this look like from the CLO's perspective?
So let's give you some examples of measures that go beyond and go deeper than the simple program measures. And I know these were all of interest to me as CLO at Caterpillar, and we hope they'll be of interest to you as well. So starting with formal learning, we've got L&D-wide activity measures. I certainly always wanted to know what was the total number of unique participants and total participants. Maybe I'd be interested in an average completion rate. From a course management point of view, if you're running learning like a business, don't you want to deliver on time? So wouldn't you be curious about the percent of courses developed and delivered on time? Wouldn't you be curious from a learning ops point of view about your utilization rate for courses, hours, instructors, classrooms? Reach was one of the measures my CEO most wanted to see when I was at Caterpillar. Davey would say, what percent of employees are being touched by something from Cat University? And likewise, we were in a company where our goal was to have everyone with a development plan. So are you measuring that? What percent of employees have a development plan? We certainly wanted to know about what the total cost for learning was across the entire organization. And then in addition to those types of measures, you have opportunities to aggregate some program measures now up at the entire, call it department or organizational level. So what is your average level 1, your average level 2, your average level 3? What is your total net benefit? So those are some examples of organization-wide efficiency measures that are going deeper than the program measures you're probably using today. And in chat, why don't you put in if you're using any of those? And I'm sure this group is going to. So which of these, or maybe you have some others that are similar, which of these or others are you using today? Can you put 1 or 2 up by name? Kinds of measures that go beyond the program measures, and they're probably efficiency measures, but in an aggregate level, across everything you do. In chat, do you have anything? Anyone doing any of that today? Reach, I love it, Samantha, and various activity measures. We would really hope that a lot of you, and if you haven't started measuring reach already, try if you can get a hold of that number. It's not too hard. You know, the number of employees who have been touched by learning, either registered or a member of community of practice or whatever, divided by your total number of employees. It's an easy one to calculate. I think your senior leaders will be interested in reach and hopefully percent with the development plan as well. Yeah, they should be measuring costs. That's another common factor. CEOs would expect you to be able to answer the question, what are we spending on learning in our company? So you should know what learning costs for your organization. So we've got some people doing that, so great. Peggy, let's move on to informal learning. And informal learning is an area that's certainly growing in popularity. Peggy mentioned them. So a lot of you have content on your portal. We're not talking about an LMS now. We're talking about videos, articles, content on your portable, on demand. We're talking about coaching and mentoring. We're talking about communities of practice for knowledge sharing. We're talking about performance support tools. All examples of informal learning. And we're going to be interested in a second to see how many of you have started measuring those? Because you can. Measurement is not limited to simply formal learning. You can always want to ask about how many unique and total users do we have, or how many tools are being used, or how many sessions have been conducted. But you can also get a type of level 1 reaction or satisfaction for all of these, with both the process and the results it's bringing, likeliness to continue to do that or apply it in the future. Of course, you'll have to switch to a periodic survey. You can't do event-based surveys very well for informal learning, or else you drive people nuts. So maybe semi-annually or annually, you put out a survey and ask, are you a member of a community of practice? Have you used any performance support tools in the last 6 months? If so, which ones did you use? How often did you do it? And what did you think of it? Did it give you the results you wanted? Would you recommend it to others? Now you've got both efficiency and effectiveness measures for your informal learning. So in chat, we're going to be curious, high expectations for this group. You know, a lot of groups we talk to say, I haven't gotten there yet, not doing any informal learning, let alone measuring it. But I'll bet this group's a little different. So are you doing and are you measuring your informal learning? Let us know through chat. See if you can keep the streak going for this high-performing group today. We'll give you a second to put something in. All part of running learning like a business, as Peggy was just saying. You need to be on top of these things. So a CLO would certainly want to be. And it really reaches a whole different group of people sometimes. There may be some people don't need to be taking any formal learning. But they do benefit from being a member of a community of practice, or they do make use of the portal content or performance support tools. You'd be missing them if you just looked at data from your LMS. Samantha, doing some satisfaction work, still working to expand that. Yes, kind of doing it informally, if you will, informally measuring informal learning through some feedback. But your next step would be to try to formalize that a little bit as you get more informal learning going.
As
I
an
guess the bottom
example,
line here is to take informal learning seriously, just like you take formal learning. And you want to manage it seriously. And you need information on efficiency and effectiveness to do that, and to make a business case for expanding it or getting into it if you're not into it yet.
I had a client that I worked with once who was very, very active with informal learning, lots and lots of community of practice. And we did periodic, it was quarterly surveys, specifically of people who were members, but also people who might be, adjacent. And it was very helpful to them to figure out whether people were able to find what they needed to find, whether it was serving them well, was it a good use of their time. And it turned out that from these surveys, they learned a lot of things that they needed to change. And so it was really important to them to be able to make sure that they were in fact managing these communities and not just
Right.
letting them run their course.
Indeed. At Caterpillar, we had 4,000 active communities of practice with 40,000 active participants. So you can bet that we were going to look at that very closely, and we really needed to get the data on that. All right, Peggy, let's go on to the last one, which kind of goes beyond both formal and informal learning into these other categories, which are also so important. And you may not have thought about measuring these before, but you can measure in these categories, like vendor management. Do you have an idea, more than just informal, how well your vendors are delivering, how well they align, whether they're on time or not? People's opinion about their quality. People and resource utilization. Peggy was talking about the challenge COVID gave a lot of organizations. So, do you know where the hours are going, how long it takes to develop and deliver? Do you know what a workload looks like? Do you have a calendar for the year? You can measure all of that. You can measure what people are spending their time on. Of course, these days, with skill gaps being highlighted and a lot of skill work being done out there, there's a lot we can measure as we all get into skills more and skill frameworks and achieving proficiency levels more quickly through the skilling that's going on. Likewise with technology situations. Does your tech stack meet your needs? Is it delivering? You can certainly measure user experiences with all the elements of tech right now. In the old days, we certainly measured learner experience with the LMS and other systems. So across all of these, our reminder to you is not to forget these either. So if you're going to run learning like a business, you're going to manage formal and informal learning well, and you're also going to manage your other systems and processes that you use. And all these have efficiency and effectiveness measures. They're going to give you greater insight and help you manage your resources better and make a better case for getting a greater budget next year. Peggy?
Yes. So now we've given you some introduction to these ideas, some of the measures. It's pretty standard stuff in some ways, but we're not necessarily always using it. We're not applying it. So we're going to do an application exercise. It's going to be a guided process. And because we couldn't leave this session today without talking about AI, it's an AI example. So the guided activity is you are an organization that is piloting an AI tool and you want to accelerate program design and development. And the tool helps to analyze performance data. It'll generate outlines and content draft, it'll recommend modalities, and it will help you personalize learning paths. And you want to evaluate the success of this initiative through three lenses: efficiency data, that deals with activity, but also cost, effectiveness, and impact. And we're going to go through a series of chats and we're going to ask you to tell us what things you would measure. And then we will show you some ideas we came up with. And the goal is for you to mention things that we didn't. So, again, to the high performing group. So, we're going to start with efficiency measures. We want you to identify one or two measures that would indicate the extent to which AI created more efficiency in program design and development. We'll give you 20, 30 seconds. Put your ideas in chat. And once we get enough chatter going on, we'll show you what we were thinking about. Time spent on program development, maybe.
Mhm.
Yes. Difference in
Yeah,
speed, time spent,
good ones.
reduction, measuring time on projects. Keep going. These are all great. The amount of time it takes for instructional design.
We certainly hope you'd see results in these areas you're all putting into chat right now. That'd be the reason for doing this.
And I want to say also, one of the things that we are big believers on, you start, you identify the measures of success before you begin. So these aren't things we're just going to happen to do afterwards because you may not have the processes in place to do all of these things, in which case you're going to have to establish some. So we're going to talk, there's one on quality. We're going to talk about that reported efficiency of instructional designers for users because we got the content from them faster, how long it takes to get a project to the implementation point. These are all excellent. So here's what
Very
we can,
good.
some of the same. Cycle time from learning need to program launch. This was just a different way of saying what you've already said. And you could do a pre versus post. Percent reduction in manual content creation, cost per course module developed. Some of you mentioned cost. Content reuse rate. So if you're using AI generated templates that you can then repurpose for other things, that could help accelerate, and developer hours saved. And then you all had a really great set of other ones that will add in for future groups. So yeah, so these are things about efficiency, and that's what this is about. So from this type of data, we can uncover the extent to which AI streamlines workflow and presumably reduces cost. So this is all great. So next up, effectiveness. So we're going to do the same thing, the extent to which AI created more effective programs. And by effectiveness, we're talking about quality. So what are some things that you could put in place to determine whether AI is improving the quality of your programs? You might do it faster, but what did I see? There was like AI slop was a term I heard on LinkedIn recently. Don't put AI slop out there. It was like, oh my gosh, there's plenty of that. Relevance to the competency, not generic stuff. I love that. Others. This is engagement with the topic. So student engagement. Uh, Feedback from learners on implementing the learning, completion rate, post-training satisfaction, relevant completion rate would be could be an efficiency measure that more people complete it. So that's actually kind of not a bad one. And post-training satisfaction, relevance, solution aligned to learning journey, performance increase. Ooh, hold that thought. These are great. So here's what we came up with. So if you have a process about looking at quality and quality standards, you could look at how many pass on first review. And if you don't have one, it's probably not a bad idea to have something like that. Readability or clarity scores for AI generated content. Learner ratings on clarity, relevance, or usability. Many of you made reference to something like that. Personalization accuracy. So if we're doing personalization by role, how well did it do that? Did it direct me to the right resources? But I love all the ones that you had here, skills targeted versus skills learned. We're going to talk about that in a moment. All right, so the last one here, let me just cover this. So from this type of data, we can identify the extent to which AI-supported design actually produced better, more usable and relevant learning experience. So it can't be just that it was well written, but it has to be relevant and it has to be usable. People have to be able to apply it. So did it actually do that? So that's what we're getting at here. So Dave, this one's for you.
Yeah, last. And I think before we actually get into this, I think what we've just shown that makes it all the more important to have good baselines. So whenever you're talking about process improvements, you really need to be able to compare what you get out of your new process with some baseline. So all the more reason to start collecting the kind of information we shared with you so you can make a powerful case for efficiency and effectiveness improvements out of your new processes. But as Peggy said, yeah, we'd hope that you not only get an improvement in efficiency and effectiveness, but perhaps some impact as well. So next, we'd like you to think about any potential impact measures that might come out of this initiative to use AI-assisted program design and development. So could that make a difference on business outcomes? What kind of outcomes could that improve?
But don't stretch too far. We don't, let's be clear that whatever you come up with should be credible that, I had a colleague I worked with who said, can it pass the red face test? Will you turn red? Will you turn red?
And really, again, focusing here on the AI assisted part. So, so we've got some good ones there. It may be that you want to off to improve time to efficiency. So that could be a type of an outcome measure. We had, I think, improvement in performance mentioned before under
Yep.
effectiveness. And that improvement in performance that you get perhaps because AI is going to make a more custom tailored solution. So that improvement in individual performance or business performance might very well be due to the AI assisted design. Samantha, the
Let's
application would really be effectiveness. So applications level 3. So let's put that back under effectiveness. But yes, maybe they'd be able to apply it better. Less time in training, cost savings. That would be an efficiency measure. So it's a little hard sometimes to sort out the impact, the outcome type measures. We've got Betsy, performance improvement, definitely, to the extent you can measure that. So we did have the time to skill, just like you did improvement up there, as you did in performance improvement. So the two that several of you have been mentioning are the ones that came to our mind as well. Quality measures of performance, maybe, or maybe that's effectiveness. But yes, I think it's possible. And just remember that for any process improvement, it doesn't necessarily have to have an impact or an outcome. It should have an improvement in efficiency and or effectiveness. It wouldn't have to have an outcome or impact, but it's great when it does. And you've identified some very real world type potential improvements in impact between the performance improvement and reduced time to skill.
And this is a good exercise for you to try with anything that you're doing. And if you're involved in any initiatives, you ask the question, what are our indicators of success? And you don't need dozens of measures. We've suggested many. You don't need all of them. There may be a few core efficiency, a few core effectiveness, and maybe an impact. And as Dave said, maybe not. So you don't have to be searching for an impact. But the fact is, every L&D organization is doing things to improve their efficiency effectiveness. AI is probably a part of it somewhere. So this exercise is something you can probably bring back to work and start thinking, well, what does that look like? And how will we know? And to Dave's important point, you need to have the baseline. So if you don't have a baseline from it, then you may not have a good sense of how much it's improved. So that's something you need to think about too. And it may be that there are things you should start measuring today for a whole bunch of things that you're not, that give you an opportunity to see when you've improved them.
Yeah, you'll be surprised about the power of a good baseline
Yeah.
and how frustrated you can be when you get done with an improvement and there's no baseline to compare it to. And so it's nice to have that baseline. All right, so what's our call to action for you? We hope we've persuaded you by this point that program evaluation is not synonymous with measurement, that measurement is the broader concept, and program evaluation is one of the 4 reasons to measure, and it only uses a fraction of all the measures that are available to us in our profession. So we'd love to urge you to commit to go beyond program measurement. If you hadn't thought about those other 3 reasons to measure, we've all done Inform, whether you call it that or not. But really, we're thinking now about monitoring and managing. In most organizations, there'd be an opportunity for you to shift focus a little bit more towards monitoring and managing, because that's really part of running, learning like a business. It's having the discipline to compare to a threshold, or the discipline to put a challenging plan target out there and then manage toward it throughout the year. So really important to begin thinking about all of the 4 reasons to measure, and begin thinking more about these other 90 measures we have in L&D, which are mostly about operational efficiency. And as Peggy mentioned, we've got the term these days learning ops. It encompasses a lot of that, but maybe not all of it. But the idea is that running learning like a business not only implies doing your programs well, but also running the rest of your business well and having the data to show that and looking for opportunities for improvement and following up on those, which you won't do if you don't have the baseline data. So it's really important to do that.
So what we're going to do now is we're not going to just have a call to action. We're going to make you come up with ideas. So we're going to do something that we call a chat storm. We don't know if you've ever done a chat storm, so let me introduce the concept and how it works. So we are going to give you a question that you're going to answer. I'm not going to give it to you yet. And you will type your response into chat, but you do not send it. Do not hit the send button. So you got to really hold off. I'm bad at that. That's why I have a lot of situation where did you really mean to send that? No. Um, so what we'll do is we'll give you the question. We'll give you about 10, 20 seconds to answer the question. And when we say go, you hit send. And really, there's 54 of you here. I'd like to see responses from every one of you because it's so much fun to see what people are thinking about. And so here's the question. Shouldn't be that hard. We've already talked about it. Identify one operational measure your organization is not measuring today, but you feel should start measuring now. So we're going to give you a little bit of time. Dave and I are going to probably not do too much chatting because we want you to be able to think. And so I don't know, should I put my timer on? I guess I could do that.
So Simon has not said go yet. So
Right.
don't put anything in yet.
Well, type, but don't hit send. You want to type,
Right.
but don't
Don't
send, but
send it
don't hit,
yet.
but don't send.
One operational measure, a non-program measure.
I may give a little bit longer than 20 seconds. I'm going to give 30. All right, go. It's always my favorite part. I love it, love it, love it. Okay, let's go through these. Oh my gosh, this is so much fun. I love it. Let's see, let's
A lot
go
of good,
through.
but duplication of work, that would be a great one to be measuring. Eliminate that.
Make it
Do
bigger.
more in informal learning, Peggy. I see quite a few highlighting that.
Yeah. Level 4, cost of course module develop, efficiency of build deploy, measure process, informal learning stats. We need to start measuring reach, specifically by various roles. Impact of leadership development program from the perspective of direct reports. Um, assessing strategic fit of our vendors, development measures, time, number of people, duplication of work within the team. That's yeah, how people and resources are being used effectively. Informal learning, we guess a couple of those. Wow. Learning transfer assessment, effective member service, effectiveness of member service. Not sure what that means.
May mean how you're serving the employees. Like is your LMS getting complaints?
Ah,
Is it hard to work with your LMS people? Is there a helpline that isn't doesn't get good marks?
yeah.
Those would be process related
Oh,
issues,
thank you,
LMS
Matt.
issues. Yeah.
Yeah, LMS issue. Thank you. So now that you've seen all of those, which is great, thank you so much. What do what do I see? I see a real mix. It's interesting. There's a sort of a mix of things that are efficiency based, but also some things that are effectiveness based in terms of how effective the operation is working. And that's really the point behind this is that as we've said, you can't have an organization that can deliver to the business if the operation isn't working smoothly. So this is all about how you can make that happen. So these are excellent. So what we want to do at this point is we want to go into some Q&A. I did see one question in the chat in the question tab, Are there other ways to measure informal learning other than surveys? So, a couple of things. Surveys are, to be honest, the most common. So, it's Georgina. Thank you for the question. But one of the things that we have seen is that oftentimes there will be things that relate to focus groups where you're meeting face to face with individuals who are part of, like with communities of practice, where you will meet with people. Because part of the challenge with surveys is surveys will answer the questions that you ask, but it will not answer the questions that you did not ask. This is oftentimes what comes from comments. And so comments and open-ended comments are really helpful. But oftentimes it's really, really helpful to have sit downs with people and ask them, what are the biggest challenges you're having? What are the things that are standing in your way? What could make it better? And by having those conversations, that can help you, I think, identify one, is this unique to any specific community, or is it something that's broader across the organization? And then you can even take that and you can turn that into a survey. So sometimes I sort of lead with more of the focus group and fact finding before we actually construct a survey. So don't know if that helped you, Georgina, but that's something I've seen. Anybody else want to weigh in on something you've done? Always like to hear everybody else's point of view on this. Any other questions? We did have one that I saw about where do you start with this. So I want to note that. So Dave, do you want to answer that about, we're new to this, we haven't done it, where do we start?
Yeah, I think the natural starting point is to consider those departmental measures because you already know about the program measures. So we're trying to get you in digging deeper is to look beyond that. And it's probably easier to look for some of those organization-wide departmental measures, maybe as a starting point rather than even tackling one of your processes. So if you're not measuring something like reach today, if you're not measuring the percent with the development plan, if you're not adding up the total number of participants you have, those would all be good sorts of measures to begin with. Total number of courses used, total number of hours used, all those sorts of measures would be really good. Now I'd start with the formal learning and that basic kind of engagement with the learning function that the reach measure gives you. So I think all those are a good starting place. If you have never begun to pull together the cost of learning in your organization, if you're a medium to large size L&D group, I'd be surprised if your CFO or CEO hasn't asked the CLO how much is being spent on learning. And that takes some work. You got to go out, and if you've got other departments who are doing learning, you've got to get data from all of them and add it to what you are responsible for. But that's another very basic measure, is to know what is being spent not just within your L&D department, but what's being spent on learning across your entire organization.
And Dave, I would add to that to identify what are the pain points that the organization is having. And
Mm.
oftentimes the pain point is because you're not managing something really well. So if you start getting feedback that people are burning out, if you're getting feedback that the courses that you're developing aren't necessarily building the capability the way they need to, is there a capability lack in the people who are designing them? And if you're starting to have issues with vendors, are there things that you could be doing to manage them better? So I think one way you can think about it is think about what's not working in the function, not at the program level per se, but at the function today, and what might that suggest of things that you should start measuring. And that often is a big trigger for that, of or organizations that are trying to reduce the number of vendors. Well, maybe you should try to figure out, what are those indicators of success, and what are those things that would help you make those determinations. So I've seen that a lot where this is a pain point. We're going to start measuring it. We have another question that came in. And what does the process of establishing thresholds for monitoring look like? I'll just start, Dave. I would like you to weigh in on it. So, as Dave mentioned earlier, the thresholds are really about sort of looking at the past as opposed to trying to predict or trying to have something aspirational for the future. So oftentimes you can take your existing data and say, where does it fall? So where do we see something where it's at risk? So if we're looking at your level one, for example, or you're looking at your evaluations, and you see that generally courses are 75% favorable or above, and so that becomes your threshold for whether or not you take action. Could be 80, whatever the number is, but it's oftentimes something that is based upon what you have seen in your own organization. It's not going to move the needle per se, but it helps at least identify when there is a problem that you should address. Dave, what
No,
would
that's
you?
exactly right. Yeah, it's quality control, and so you could graph out the results from that same course, over the past 5 years or whatever. You're looking at historical data and seeing what the best is you've accomplished in the past. And unless you think it was a one-off, if most are running around 4 to 4.3 on a 5-point scale, you've got one at 4.9. Well, I wouldn't use the 4.9 as a threshold, but I would look back at maybe we're getting a number of 4.3s. Okay, so you've clearly been able to get a 4.3 in the past for this course. Why wouldn't you expect to get that in the future? So that'd be a great threshold. And you would be alerted if it drops below that because you're expecting it to be at 4.3 or right around 4.3. So just take a look at history, graph it out, maybe eliminate an outlier if there's one really high one that might have been a fluke. So kind of what's been repeatable in the past in terms of high scores. And you should be able to keep doing that, at least that.
Yeah. We don't have any more questions. I'm going to take a look and see if there's anything else in chat at this point. But why don't we'll go to kind of our closing pitch here. Let me
And
go.
maybe a final thought too, Peggy, is that if we've given people a lot of ideas and you're saying to yourself, oh my gosh, I haven't thought about a lot of this. We're not doing a lot of what they just talked about. Well, that's okay. We were all there once too. Kat, you didn't start by doing all this either. So it's a process. It's a journey through time. So you might just try to list from our talk today, from what else you've read, the measures you would like to begin measuring. And then maybe it's a multiple year plan because some of these may require help from IT, may require some internal systems to start sending you data that you're not getting today. So it's not just flipping a switch. You've got to set yourself up. You've got to create a process to give you the data that you need on a lot of these measures. So don't be too hard on yourself, but use this as aspiration and create perhaps a multi-year plan, identifying some priorities, a couple to work on next year, a couple to work on the year after. And before you know it, 5 years will have passed and you will be a significantly better operation because of it. Okay,
Yeah,
learn
absolutely.
more. If you found this interesting, we've got our book, Measurement Demystified. It takes you through all those reasons to measure in detail and does cover the 110 measures. So you can really learn a lot more about what is there besides the program measures that you're most used to, and how would you do it? How would you use them? How would you share them in reports? So you can learn more all about that in the book, really learn more about monitoring and managing and get that full view of all the measures we have. Peggy?
Yeah, I just want to say about the field guide. So we wrote the field guide as a workbook. It is a companion to Measurement Demystified so that you walk through each of the processes and you identify and you actually do a practice with a case study and then you do it in your own organization. So the idea is to walk you through section by section. We know we've heard from organizations that have done this in teams so that it isn't a solo activity. It's harder to do these solo. And just getting people to start thinking differently in and of itself is going to make a difference because then you start looking and saying, oh, this isn't working. Maybe that's because we're not paying any attention to resource utilization. Let's start measuring that. So I think there's very productive ways to eliminate and to alleviate some of the pain and discomfort that organizations have by doing some of these things at the operational level, not just at the program level. So So we want
It's
to
been a
thank you.
pleasure.
Yeah, we want to thank you. And if you want to reach out to us, you can contact us on our LinkedIn. These are our LinkedIn QR codes. You can email us. I know Casey in the survey, if you would like to hear more from us, please put that in as well. And we really appreciate Casey, ELB Learning, for hosting this and giving us an opportunity to talk about subjects that interest us and that we think are important for the field.
Thank you so.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Dave, Peggy, for another amazing session. We'll see you guys next time. Okay.